Welcome to the MeidasTouch podcast. Ben, Brett, and Jordy fighting for democracy with you each and every day, each and every pod. We have a great guest for you today. We have Congressman Ted Lieu.
Wow. Let's
manager
go.
for the January 6th impeachment. There were two impeachments of Donald Trump. Yes, he was that bad. Congressman Lieu represents California's 33rd Congressional District, sits on the House Judiciary Committee, House Foreign Affairs Committee. He was also in the United States Air Force, recently retired as a colonel, so his military experience will be specifically interesting here based on everything that's going on in Ukraine. And of course, Congressman Lieu was there yesterday to the joint address of Congress by President Zelenskyy. Let's just get right into it because I am fired up. I am fired up. And let me tell you why.
Why are you fired up?
Tell us all about it.
Let me tell you why. So yesterday, President Zelenskyy gives a rousing address to a joint session of Congress. Really one of the most incredible pro-democracy, pro-freedom speeches that I've ever seen in my lifetime and that I think we've ever seen in history. There was a moment in the clip when President Zelenskyy comes out to address Congress. Remember, President Zelenskyy has a mark on his head for Putin. They are actively trying to kill him right now as he's addressing Congress. And as he walks out, he receives a standing ovation from all members of Congress, other than Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's looking at her phone or looking around. And so the MeidasTouch account, the main account, tweets very, very specifically, because words matter. And words have meaning. And guess what, people? Words have definitions and words carry with it weight. And MeidasTouch cares about words. And so, Brett, I want you to very specifically state what the tweet that MeidasTouch account said.
I feel like you're deposing Brett right now. I love it. Let's do this.
I know. And I'm going to let me pull the tweet directly because I don't want to parse any words. I don't want to paraphrase. I want to say exactly what I said. So
no taking the fifth on this one, Brett.
Yeah, Brett, definitely. Just go pull it up. I would expect that you would have it open. It's not like this was a surprise podcast.
Yeah.
Jordy makes the outlines. Jordy makes the outlines and I don't see it.
why do I have to get thrown under the bus? I
rewrote this tweet like multiple times to
we rewrote the tweet. Yes.
Yeah, we rewrote the tweet. And so it said, as Zelenskyy is greeted by the U.S. Congress to a standing ovation, Marjorie Taylor Greene refuses to applaud and instead appears to grab her cell phone. So, as we said, during the moment that Zelenskyy is greeted by the U.S. Congress to a standing ovation, meaning while everybody at that moment is standing up and applauding, giving a standing ovation, Marjorie Taylor Greene was at that moment refusing to applaud and instead appeared to grab her cell phone, which she was grabbing her cell phone.
So that was a clip. That was a clip that occurred on C-SPAN. You could all watch it with your eyes for those watching it on YouTube.
Yeah, and it wasn't an edited clip or anything. It was literally, it was pulled from the C-SPAN feed. So anybody watching C-SPAN at that time, this is what you saw with the C-SPAN cameras. You saw everybody respectfully giving a standing ovation to President Zelenskyy. And you saw Marjorie Taylor Greene kind of get up, check her cell phone and kind of look around.
Also, the definition of applause, what applause means, a demonstration of approval, that is also going to be important. We go about our day. That was one of 1,000 things that we did yesterday. I mean, not joking. So we produced in the morning the Mea Culpa Michael Cohen podcast, which is nearly at 100,000 views on YouTube, where him and Glenn Kirshner were talking about issues. They're like the biggest experts in the world on the prosecutions, potential prosecutions of Trump. So we get them on our network early on. Our partner who we work with, Patriot Takes, they put the video on later in the day of Marjorie Taylor Greene giving a rebuttal speech. More on that in a moment to President Zelenskyy. We also have the Kremlin File podcast that goes yesterday, where we had like the foremost expert on Russian disinformation on who debunks like 1,000 Putin lies.
I want to pause there for a sec because this was an incredible episode of Kremlin Files. So Kremlin Files really, it's like the preeminent podcast on Russia and the rise of autocracy in Russia.
Produced by MeidasTouch.
Produced by MeidasTouch. And so this episode yesterday, they had on a Ukrainian researcher who has set up a website to debunk all of Russia's disinformation campaigns. And so it's incredible, hearing the insight from this guy in Ukraine who has dedicated his life to building this platform to combat Russian, these fake news stories, like actual fake news stories and fake videos that Russia's releasing and all their propaganda. So I just thought it was incredibly fascinating. And yeah, sorry to interrupt, but that was a
no, it was great. And it was absolutely great to have that. And we produced probably, hundreds of tweets yesterday, 1,000 data points of content from us and from our kind of creative partners out there who were working diligently to fight for democracy. And one of them actually was, we focused on the fact that, and this was not focused on by mostly all of the mainstream media, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is not a fringe figure in the Republican Party, the Republican leadership, people who are prominent Republican figures, say that if they take over the House, Marjorie Taylor Greene's going to get major prominent positions. She's basically the voice, the mouthpiece for the Republican Party. They don't condemn her. They don't say negative things about her, and they let her have these platforms. She gave a pre-scripted rebuttal to President Zelenskyy, where she gave misinformation after misinformation. She states falsely that Obama created Ukraine. She spouts the propaganda that Ukraine, it has Nazis and engages in Nazism at a high level. False fact after false. She says that the United States should not fund Ukraine with military aid, with weapons, with supplies. She says that Putin is going to win. This wasn't some random off the rails speech. This was a scripted, formal speech that she gave on her official account.
And her message was Ukraine should surrender. That was the message of her speech after hearing this riveting speech by President Zelenskyy. Ukraine should surrender was her message.
Where's the mainstream media covering that? Traitorous conduct. And MeidasTouch covered that. So we go about our day. And then in the evening, the first newspaper, if you want to call it newspapers anymore, the first digital magazine, it's a digital magazine now, Newsweek, did like a fact check and basically said that our video from earlier in the day, that frankly I even forgot about at this point, was even a thing because it was such a minor video in the swing of all of the pro-democracy we work, that she was actually clapping. And that there were later clips of her clapping where she touched her hands very tepidly. I thought, this is stupid, but whatever. I was going to joke with the brothers. I say, you wait, Daniel Dale's going to come with a fact check. Because
I definitely made a joke about it to somebody. I think I made a joke about it to Jordy. Just wait for Daniel Dale to get his hands on this blockbuster of a story.
Right?
Yeah.
And then sure enough, we wake up this morning and Daniel Dale gives a message that what he's been working on is a story that's going to fact check MeidasTouch for saying exactly the quote that Brett read, that when Zelenskyy came out, that Marjorie Taylor Greene refused to applaud. And he goes out, he says, well, I'll give you some time to respond. And then he posts it right away. Even
that was the weird thing. He said, I got a message at, and I'll read you the times. I got a message from him at 6:53 a.m. Hey, I'm doing this story, would like some clarity on this at 6:53 a.m. However, he posted a tweet about it at 6:36 a.m., about 20 minutes prior to even reaching out for our response and our context of it. So he posted without even getting our comment on it. And so at that point I said, I guess, I said, Daniel, I'm happy to speak to you about this and provide you context and let you know what's going on here. But I see you already went on Twitter, with a 6 tweet rant. So I guess we'll talk about it on there. And he said, okay, sounds good.
Remember when the right-wing media spread the Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib is giving a response, a rebuttal to Biden? And then remember all the other press, like not the radical right press, like mainstream press, bought that hook, line, and sinker and wrote, oh, there's a progressive rebuttal and the progressives are eating each other up because progressives just buy into this right-wing garbage talking points. And here we actually have a Republican member of Congress giving a rebuttal to President Zelenskyy at a pivotal moment when Ukraine is winning the war. Crickets. You don't hear a thing from mainstream media. And the first thing that we hear is this is what Daniel Dale wants to focus on, is whether or not she clapped. And he's going to write a story saying that MeidasTouch put disinformation out there. Let's be clear, though, if we want to talk about actual facts here for a second, because when we break down what applause are and the timing, Brett was very specific about the actual tweet. She refused to applaud as Zelenskyy was going out. And then he even wrote in his tweet, like, it was a tepid,
she was a pretty tepid clapper, but full footage showed that she clapped 4 times.
She clapped 4 times later in the speech. She clapped 4 times.
He said when Zelenskyy and Pelosi appear, he said green claps, 3 to 4 seconds, stops Graham's phone. So that was his clap. And I'm playing the video right now for the viewers of what he is counting as applause. And I just want you to look at this with your own eyes and say if that's applause. And I'll also say this. Okay, say this was your wedding or something. Say you just told your friend that you got married, that you're getting engaged, okay? And this was their response. How would you feel? I feel like it's like a Larry David, like Curb Your Enthusiasm episode where he has a friend, like a friend who is the star of a play, and the friend looks out into the audience. He sees everybody else standing up, and then he sees Larry looking down at his phone, getting up and kind of like playing patty cake with his hands for 2 seconds and sitting down. Like that would be the plot of an entire episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Actually sounds like a great episode of Curb. I got to be honest with you.
Like Jordy asked me.
Here's the thing, though. Do I want to be talking about the applause?
No.
Or is it a clap? No. And you know how you know I don't want to talk about? Because that was one little tiny freaking thing we did yesterday out of 1,000 things that we did yesterday. And where we focused on yesterday was Marjorie Taylor Greene being a traitor to the United States of America, and Republicans being traitors to the United States of America, and Fox News being traitors. And you have a choice when you are media. You have a choice of what you're going to cover. And you're going to cover pro-democracy? Are you going to cover Ukrainian bravery? Or are you going to rush to the defense of Marjorie Taylor Greene and claim that later claps, having nothing to do with the clip that we showed, shows that she is applauding and fact check? The biggest power the media has is the stories that they focus on. And so the reason that I'm focused on this on the beginning of the show, because in many ways, diverting attention and focusing on these issues and putting the resources of a powerful platform like Daniel Dale has into this type of issue, when he should be fact checking everything she said that was false in her rebuttal to Zelenskyy, that Obama created Ukraine, that Putin is winning the war, that this is a both sides issue where both sides are to blame for Russia's unlawful invasion. That's what you should be spending your time fact checking. You should spend your time fact checking everything and the lies that are spewed every single night on Fox News by Tucker Carlson, by Laura Ingraham. And this is what you choose to spend your time. This was his main story of the day. Are you kidding me? Mainstream media. And I go back to the rebuttal on the progressive rebuttal to Biden, because this highlights exactly what is wrong with our media today. Because on the right wing, you have radical right fascists who know exactly what the fuck they're doing. Tucker Carlson knows what he's doing. Rupert Murdoch knows what he's doing. They're out there to manipulate minds every single night and to radicalize a portion of our country with false and disgusting information every single night. And on the other hand, you have people like Daniel Dale who are focused on fact checking applause versus a clap, and the clip that we have, which was very specific, and then tried to say that's disinfo. That's not disinfo. And I'm tired of it. I'm sick and tired of this media being pathetic. It's pathetic. And this is why MeidasTouch exists. And you know what also bothers me? I would say truthfully, in response to, us, and, we corrected Daniel Dale because we're fighters. I'm not going to sit on the sideline as someone lies about me, my brothers, and our movement. So we pointed out everything that we said here. We're like, Daniel, we said at the beginning, this was applause, is different than clapping later. It's applause at the beginning. We were very specific in our words when President Zelenskyy goes out. But then you have people who identify, I suppose, as progressives or on the left say, leave Daniel alone. Leave, he's a good guy too.
Can't stand that.
This is a movement where we fight for democracy. This is a movement of life or death. That's what it is, because those are what the stakes are right now. This is a movement where I'm going to fight every single day for everyone who's a Midas Mighty, everybody who cares about democracy. I don't care if that's liberal. I don't care if that's progressive. I don't care if that's conservative. If you care about democracy, I am going to fight for you. And if you don't like fighters, if you don't like people who are going to punch back at lies and stupidity, I'll tell you what, MeidasTouch may not be the movement for you. You may not want to be a part of a pro-democracy movement. Jordy, I have no clue what you're pointing at. Right?
There's the door. Get out if you're not ready to fight for democracy.
Jordy's pointing at the green wall, I think, and his open closet.
Jordy's pointing at the closet. But I mean it, and I'm fired up, and I'm fired up because the stakes are so high. This isn't watching a basketball match of the Raptors versus the Lakers and covering it as an announcer. Oh, LeBron James is dribbling the ball down the court. Oh, and then the Raptors take the ball. Oh, he shoots a three-pointer. Oh, he shoots a foul shot. This is life or death. Hospitals are being bombed in the Ukraine. A school building is being bombed in Ukraine, being intentionally targeted by Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin has talked about ethnic cleansing within his states, which we'll talk about in a second. So enough of the pathetic media. You're either fighting for democracy or, frankly, you're just as bad as Tucker Carlson.
I don't know, Ben. Daniel Dale has a pretty good clap timeline.
He put a clap timeline.
Pretty good clap timeline.
But just think about that.
And Pelosi
He's getting
appear.
a real salary from a real network.
And I think, he's done great work in the past with Trump and stuff. But I honestly just think, I don't think he knows what the cover.
He did the same thing.
Yeah,
I just remembered he did the same thing during the January 6th insurrection, where we called out Marco Rubio, and we called out Marco Rubio for supporting the insurrection. He goes, fact check, false. It's like Marco Rubio supported all of Trump's bogus big lie stuff. Marco Rubio encouraged the trucker convoy to knock Biden's bus off the road.
Yeah.
And then because Marco Rubio was like, yeah, that was not a good insurrection. I'm against that. Marco Rubio said it. Fact check.
Cleared. Cleared of all prior wrongdoing.
You have to focus on context. You have to focus on what's at stake here. It's not. This isn't just some silly. I wake up and I just, what should I write about today? Oh, let's write about clapping. No, this is democracy on the line, here and abroad, with Ukrainians bravely fighting for our democracy each and every day, as we have American traitors in the Republican Party, leaders who are out there rooting for Putin, as we have those same lines being parroted. Play the clip that same night. They get their talking points from the same people. Play the clip of Laura Ingraham that night, essentially saying verbatim, and I'll give Tom Cotton credit here. He deserves credit here, because Tom Cotton actually was like, no, you're absolutely wrong here. But Laura Ingraham was saying to him, using the other talking points, isn't it just a waste of time to give the Ukrainians money when it's inevitable? Putin's going to win. And I give Tom Cotton credit, but she used the exact same talking points that morning from that part of the Republican Party.
I mean, just look today, they announced the transfer of $800 million of weapons to Ukraine. That's welcome. Should have been done a month ago or 2 months ago, and it's still just a fraction of what Congress proposed last week. Look, the Ukrainian people and army have proven that they are capable of fighting the Russians. We need to encourage them to do so, and we need to provide them the weapons that they need to fight the Russians.
Now, you don't think we're giving the Ukrainians at this point and the rest of the world false hope? You think, given the fact that Russia is closing in on Ukraine at this moment, you heard the air raid sirens outside of Lviv, that we're not building people up to this false hope at this point? I'm worried about that, given the fact that still so many people are in those cities. I'm worried.
Laura, I really don't.
And you know what, though? I don't want to let Tom Cotton off the hook, though, because I'll tell you what, too, that like literally within hours after Zelensky's speech, Republicans in the Senate blocked the confirmation of officials who were tasked with leading the U.S. efforts to support Ukraine. And let me just quote from U.S. Senator, Democrat from New Jersey, Bob Menendez, quote, "It is amazing to me, my colleagues who got up to applaud President Zelensky, my colleagues who came on the Senate floor to talk about both the need to help Ukraine and the humanitarian realities that are compounding every day. They get up and clap and then come to the floor to object to the very things that come to help Ukraine." And these are what Republican Senator Rick Scott, he blocked Chairman Menendez's efforts for the Senate to confirm Jim O'Brien to be coordinator of sanctions, Julietta Valls to be Assistant Secretary of State for Population, Refugees, and Migration, Elliot Kang to be Assistant Secretary of State for International Security and Nonproliferation.
And I'll tell you what would happen in this case. So now, if we were to say these Republicans don't support Ukraine, they don't. I mean, they're not voting for aid. They're not helping. They're not allowing these appointments to go through. If we were to say that, then you could get a Daniel Dale fact check that said, what do you mean? They applauded. They said they stand with Ukraine. Marsha Blackburn tweeted, "I stand with Ukraine. The U.S. stands with Ukraine. So they must stand with Ukraine." Fact check, false. And that's why you need to take into account context when you do these things. That's why you can't just go off people's words, because you need to understand context to understand it. And when you see, going back to it, when you see Marjorie Taylor Greene kind of mushing her hands together, kind of clapping, looking the other direction, whatever, that's not an applause. And it's so silly that we're like talking that your whole story is about a clap versus an applause, and this is what you decided to make your cause du jour. But let's talk about really Republican support of Ukraine. Who is really standing with Ukraine? Who is not? Who is directly pushing Russian propaganda that is then literally being aired by the Kremlin on Russian TV channels? Don't give me that. Don't give me that these people support Ukraine. Don't give me that was an applause which denotes approval of what was going on, approval of Zelensky, when she did it for a couple seconds at a time, a couple minor, as you said, tepid claps, and then went on to say that Ukraine was a Nazi country created by Barack Obama and Joe Biden, and that they should give up. Just don't give me that. Like it's garbage. It's insanity.
Day in, day out, we're having the top experts inside Ukraine, living in Europe, people who have fled Ukraine, give the truthful information and the accurate information of what is going on there every single day. And we do it because a lot of this, sadly, is not being covered by the mainstream media, with the mainstream media being focused on stories like applause versus clap. And to that, I give the thumbs down.
Oh, the thumbs down. The dreaded thumbs down.
It's a very, very impassioned opening. So it's
I
do we
loved
bring
it. I
Ted Lieu
loved
now,
it.
or do we should we cover some more news? I mean, I'm fired up. I mean, where do I go next?
I think you're fired up though, because I think maybe you took some thesis this morning, Ben.
Ooh, what a transition.
Maybe we should talk a little about thesis, because some days you wake up ready to take on the world and other days you just can't take it. Imagine what you could do if you had a good day every day. And with thesis, you could get it all done and make the impact that you're meant to. Thesis makes personalized supplement formulas that are specifically designed to boost cognitive function. It's based in the science of nootropics, which are natural and powerful ingredients like caffeine, ginseng, and B12 that increase productivity, focus, energy, and mental clarity. Feel energized without the crash, cut through the brain fog to think clearly, or get a little help with motivation to find your flow. Take their 3-minute quiz, and Thesis will recommend high quality nootropic formulas that are unique to you and your goals. Over 60,000 entrepreneurs, lawyers, engineers, busy professionals, and parents have used Thesis to get better results at work, at home. So imagine what you could do with Thesis. And right now, Thesis is offering our listeners 10% off your first starter kit when you visit takethesis.com/Meidas. Go to takethesis.com/Meidas to take this quiz and discover your unique nootropic combination and save 10% on your first starter kit. That's takethesis.com/MEIDAS. Make sure to use our URL to let them know we sent you. I know Jordy took his thesis today. Maybe, Jordy, that will give you the motivation, the energy to ask not one, but multiple questions.
I've been preparing for that.
Let's see.
I've been preparing for our interview with Congressman
Big
Lieu,
interview. You got to get that thesis in. I love it. Thank you to all of our sponsors. It's for making the show happen. It's
and
great.
Before we bring in Ted Lieu, let me go to Jordy first. Jordy, have you prepared for this interview?
I'm prepared. I got my eyes checked yesterday, and I have 20/20 vision. These glasses
really
are fake.
No contacts, no glasses.
No, nothing. I'm the only
Very
brother
impressive.
that. Yeah. So just in case anyone was wondering out there, I've been like, what prescription are you? No. This is just for show. It's a style thing. It gives me confidence during the interviews.
So that's what I did. Pro-democracy. That gives you confidence during the interviews.
Yeah. No, it's like a cape. It's like my Superman cape.
Okay.
That's okay. Yeah.
What an interesting episode this is.
You're wearing your MeidasTouch Pro-democracy
hat.
hat.
I'm wearing my MeidasTouch Pro-democracy hat too. You can pick this up at store.MeidasTouch.com. That's store.MeidasTouch.com. We have some really incredible merch out there. It really helps keep the show going. So make sure you check out store.MeidasTouch.com. Get one of these Pro-democracy hats, man. They're awesome.
Oh, we gotta just pull up this tweet from Marjorie Taylor Greene though to Bill Kristol before we bring in Ted Lieu. I'm just seeing this now, and it's hilarious. So Marjorie Taylor Greene wrote to Bill Kristol, who was obviously criticizing her for being a traitor. I tell you what, pumpkin, how about you suit up and report to your commander and chief yourself and tell him you're reporting for duty. You might want to train a little first. The only thing in shape on you and prepared for war is your little Twitter thumbs. At Bill Kristol. I like that she ats him too, which has no clue how Twitter works. Like if you're quote tweeting him, he will see that tweet.
And
that
so,
is essentially
to highlight what she said commander and chief, not commander in chief on the tweet.
Well, put this scary Larry, who actually did a real grammar check on her, and pointed out that literally in 3 sentences, she got 4 things wrong. And to me, that goes to the broader point. We talked about this on, I think, the last pod, or maybe when we were on the Stuttering John podcast. But I love honest, intellectual, high-level conversation. You should know that by now. And I don't like
you're a
labels.
smart man.
I don't like labels anymore. I didn't like it before, but I particularly don't like it now. And Daniel Dale, when he was liberal pack, blah, 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 that was also very intentional. When you know about MeidasTouch, you know that we're a pro-democracy media company, and we also have a PAC. But we are first and foremost a pro-democracy group. I don't use the labels. If you line up all of my views, you will probably find that I'm very progressive and that I'm liberal. But as those are traditionally defined. But if there's a day where Democrats tell me that you should start injecting bleach and we should start supporting Putin, I am going to not support those people. Okay.
Absolutely.
And supporting affordable housing, supporting getting people medication at cheaper prices and making healthcare a right for everyone, getting people food, making food something that all people should have, making the living wage a thriving wage, making people be able to celebrating workers. Those issues are my issues. So don't put me in a box of where I even am. And I support democracy. I support democracy here and abroad. And I like tough debates over this economic policy or that economic policy, this tax policy over that tax policy. I'm super interested in that. And you may find that there's a Republican, quote unquote, policy that I'm like, that one may make more sense, in which case that's fine. But at the end of the day, what I don't like is just intellectual dishonesty, stupidity, buffoonery, all of this that's embodied in these, what's the guy, Gomert? Louis Gomert. What's the guy's name?
Louis Gomert.
Gomer.
I kind of combined
Jordy's
Bobert and
messing with you.
Gomer
It's
into Gobert. I made him into a Gobert.
Jordy's messing with you. It's Gomert.
Man, that
Louis
would be
Gomert.
a horrible Frankenstein right there. A Bobert and a Gobert.
Matt Gaetz, all of these people, anyway, that's where I stand. Anyway, let's bring in Congressman Ted Lieu, representing my home state, California's 33rd Congressional District. Ted currently, it's okay, I call you Ted. I feel like I'm very informative. The Congressman Lieu currently sits on the House Judiciary Committee and House Foreign Affairs Committee. He's a former active duty officer in the U.S. Air Force, was an impeachment manager in the January 6th insurrection impeachment proceedings. Welcome to the podcast, Congressman.
Thank you, Ben, Brett, and Jordy, and totally feel free to call me Ted. And
I don't want to be so presumptuous. You're a fan favorite on the pod, but that doesn't necessarily mean I could just go about calling Congressman, Ted. But Congressman, on the more
I just want to note I'm totally okay that two of you are wearing T-shirts too.
Ouch. Well, here's the problem, Congressman. I'm a lawyer by trade. I'm supposed to be wearing suits, so this is my kind of rebellion to the profession. So. But getting into the heart of it, you were there yesterday. You were at the joint session where President Zelenskyy addressed members of Congress. What was your reaction to what he had to say? And what are you and other members of Congress doing in response to President Zelenskyy's address?
I thought President Zelenskyy gave a very powerful speech, and the video he showed was very compelling. Ukraine has done an amazing job with the kind of what we used to call in the Air Force information warfare. And they have definitely been better than the Russians at this. They really have galvanized a lot of support for them, partly because of the kind of information they've been able to put out. And I commend President Zelenskyy for also his courage for staying in Kyiv during this war. And I support giving Ukraine the weapons they need to defend themselves.
And you say, information in this has been key from the very outset. President Biden providing step by step of what Putin was doing in real time when Putin was trying to create a pretext and create and gin up some lies at Donbass and what was happening there. But what strikes me over and over again is you see these right-wing extremists, I don't know how else to call them, Congressman, who call themselves Republicans, though, who are trying to do the bidding, it appears, for Putin. And I mean, was I watching? I was, but it shocked me, a Republican and Marjorie Taylor Greene issuing like a rebuttal to Zelenskyy afterwards, saying that there shouldn't be aid to Ukraine. I was horrified yesterday. I mean, what do you think when you see that? And we shouldn't, I think, view her as some fringe figure. She's who the Republicans hoist up as a major prominent person in their party.
You're watching a radicalization of the GOP base. Marjorie Taylor Greene just went off the rails yesterday and basically is simply repeating Russian propaganda. And GOP leader Kevin McCarthy is going to do nothing about that. And that's because he is scared of his own base. And they watch Tucker Carlson, they see him say the same Russian propaganda, and no one pushes back because you have now a Republican Party that every passing day becomes more and more radical.
And Congressman, former active duty officer, retired as colonel recently in 2021. So you know a thing or two about no-fly zones and airspace and things like that. This debate over the no-fly zone in Ukraine, I think I understand it, but I think a lot of our viewers, out there and listeners think it's a little complex in the weeds. You have some people saying we need to close airspace, others saying if you close the airspace, it'll be looked at as a furtive move. What's your view on that, and how do you kind of describe this issue to, the listener out there who's not really in the weeds?
So every time you hear the three words, no fly zone, you should, in your mind, replace it with the following three words: declaration of war. That's what it would be. It would essentially be the United States and NATO forces shooting down Russian jets. That is what a no-fly zone is. So I'm opposed to a no-fly zone because I do not believe the U.S. and NATO should be directly engaging Russian forces. At the same time, I believe we need to give the Ukrainian military everything they ask for, everything they need to defend themselves. So earlier during this conflict, Congresswoman Houlihan, who is also an Air Force veteran, we wrote a letter to administration and to the Secretary of Air Force asking them to provide air assets to Ukraine, including drones, U.S. drones. And we're very pleased that the package that President Biden announced recently does include U.S. drones going to Ukraine.
What's your view of how President Biden's been handling everything?
I think President Biden has done an amazing job. He's built a worldwide coalition in terms of economic sanctions. He's also built a worldwide coalition to push back against Russian aggression and to deliver different aid and types of equipment to Ukraine. And President Biden is really the kind of adult we need at this exact moment. And I really commend him and his administration for everything they've done.
Let's talk about the midterms. I know Brett and Jordy may have some questions on some issues. An issue that I'm heavily focused on, Congressman, is seeing in radical right state after state that are run by radical right governors taking away a woman's right to choose and kind of escalating this from a 14-week abortion ban to you can't even leave the state to get an abortion. In other states, a Missouri legislator introduced an amendment to a bill that said that. We have Dobbs versus Mississippi that's coming for a written ruling soon, probably May or June. Based on oral argument, it seems that the Supreme Court's going to uphold the 15-week abortion ban and maybe even overturn Roe v. Wade. I think this is such a paramount fundamental issue, the right to choose, a constitutionally enshrined right, and that government should not be telling women what they should be doing here. Is this an issue that, one, fundamentally we need to be talking about more as Democrats and supporting women and childbearing persons, but do you see this as a major issue going into the midterms?
I think the answer is yes. We're seeing really some pretty horrific bills being introduced. Recently, a Republican state legislator actually introduced a bill to give the death penalty for women who seek abortions. And you also have Republican state officials saying that women shouldn't get abortions even when their own health and lives are at risk. And so you see this very extreme agenda come forward in a number of these red states. And I think the American public is going to see this more and more. The war in Ukraine is taking a lot of public attention, but at some point, I think many people across America are going to realize, oh my goodness, this fundamental right is going to go away in a number of states. And I do think that's going to be an issue coming into this campaign in November.
And do you think Democrats should prioritize running on that issue to try to galvanize people to just understand how important that this election really is?
So I'm very pleased my House colleagues elected me to House leadership, and I'm co-chair of the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee, and we focus on messaging and long-term messaging. So we're looking at that exact issue, in fact, right now. And what we do know is kitchen table issues continue to predominate. At this exact moment in time, people are concerned about the economy and about jobs and also about inflation. So we are looking at all the issues. We're in a very different cycle now than we were 3 decades ago because of how quickly news cycles change. Mm-hmm. So part of what's going to happen is, I think, where are the major issues and where is the public in about September of this year? And I think that will affect the November elections. And it's really hard to know. And in politics, 6 months is an eternity.
Right. Yeah. It is interesting, right? People do tend to base their opinions based on that specific time. We saw after President Biden's State of the Union speech, we saw a bump in his approval ratings because people saw him, looking strong as a leader, covering all the issues. But how do we keep that momentum? And you mentioned messaging. I think Democrats are knocked a lot for messaging. I think you are one of the best messengers in the party. I think you're always spot on with what you do. So how do we talk to the public about these kitchen table issues when they're looking around and they're seeing, high gas prices, when they're seeing inflation, when they're seeing these things, which I understand that, why you'd be upset about that. And we have to level with people and be there. But how do we also explain to them, that these are global issues facing everybody? Like, how do we just message that, in a world where we have these high prices and gas prices and things like that?
That's a great question. So one thing we should do is to talk about what we've already done. So Democrats passed American Rescue Plan that helped schools reopen and remain open. It helped get stimulus checks out to people who needed it at that moment in time. It also helped get vaccines to a lot more folks, and it created a lot of jobs. And if you look at the numbers in the first 13 months of the Biden administration, 7.4 million jobs are created, the most in U.S. history. GDP growth is at near record highs. Wages are up. And so that's a story we have to keep telling. At the same time, inflation is a problem. It's also a problem worldwide. Certainly the U.S. is not immune to this. Last month, Turkey had an inflation rate of about 48%. And so all the countries are getting hit with this. And there's basically two ways to solve inflation. You can make everybody poorer, right? Because it's basically a supply and demand issue. Or you can make sure we increase supply of products. And that's what we're working on. So the infrastructure law we passed will help ease some of the supply chain issues. We're looking at legislation now to make sure we incentivize the production of chips in the United States. One of the reasons that car prices are high is because there's not enough cars. And one of the reasons for that is because they need these microchips that there's just not enough of right now. We're also working on making sure that companies that illegally engage in price gouging are prosecuted by the Federal Trade Commission. If you look at gas prices, for example, oil is now down to below $100 a barrel. And gas prices haven't dropped very much. And that's because these oil companies are making record profits. And what we see is essentially companies taking advantage of different crises to enlarge their profits at the expense of the American consumer. And we have to point that out as well.
Totally. And I could guarantee when those gas and oil company profits come in, I could guarantee they will be record highs despite everything that is going on. I want to go back to January 6th, because Congressman, last time you were here was actually right in the aftermath of January 6th. I believe you were here like January 14th, 2021, sometime around then. And you basically gave a message to the Republican Party. You said, simply say the election was not stolen. Joe Biden won the election. Now, all this time later, do you think that Republicans have heeded your calls?
Most have not. A few have. So Senator Mike Rounds, for example, in fact, basically said that. But there's not a lot of folks that have done what he did. It is feeding this big lie that is increasing the chances of political violence. And you have a number of folks in the Republican base who continue to believe this election was stolen, even though even now they still can't identify who purportedly stole the election, nor how it was done. And that's because the election wasn't stolen. Donald Trump got crushed in the popular vote, and he lost multiple states to Joe Biden. And what we do see, unfortunately, is this continued radicalization of the Republican base. And it's also very harmful to our democracy if you have a segment of the population that doesn't trust electoral results. That's why Congress, in fact, is now working on, in fact, a bipartisan basis to reform the Electoral College Act so that we don't have state legislatures just overturn the vote for president.
I'm not sure if you caught this morning Arnold Schwarzenegger's message that he delivered. I thought it was incredibly powerful. He gave a message to the Russian people, addressed them, really made it very personal about his experience in Russia. I just wanted to get your thoughts on what Schwarzenegger had to say.
I had the opportunity to work with Governor Schwarzenegger when I was in California State Legislature. I commend Governor Schwarzenegger for his message in that video. I agree with you. It is compelling. It is powerful. The hope is that we can have people in Russia see it. And
Right.
We don't know exactly how strong Putin's disinformation is in Russia right now. We do know that, some people are getting information, but for the vast majority of the public, it's not clear they're getting any information other than what's coming from state propaganda sources.
And do you see parallels between that? Like, I can't help but see parallels between the Russians watching Russian state TV and the people here in America who are only watching things like Fox News and OAN. And, when you look at the polls, you see 70, 80% of people support Putin and they think that they're defeating the Nazis in Ukraine because they're brainwashed to think like that. And it reminded me immediately of the polls that we see of the Republican Party here. And I'm like, oh my God, these are the same thing. I was wondering if you have the same perspective or if I'm just going out of there.
That's a very interesting question. I think the difference is the analogy would be in Russia. If you change one channel, you might go from Fox to OAN, and then you change another channel, you go from OAN to Newsmax. Here in the United States, you could go from Fox to, MSNBC or Fox to CNN, and that makes a huge difference. That we do have freedom of the press in the United States. And we do have the ability to give people choices if they want to look at alternative views. That's something Russians do not have.
Absolutely. Yesterday, President Biden, in an impromptu moment, he referred to Putin as a war criminal. And Jen Psaki kind of walked it back a little bit, saying that he was just speaking from his heart. Would you unequivocally say that Putin is a war criminal in your perspective?
He absolutely is a war criminal. I don't see how anyone can see these attacks by the Russians on civilians and not say he's a war criminal. So let's be clear here. Russia bombed a building that was housing children, and on the outside of the building was written in Russian that it's children.
Horrible.
They also bombed a children and women's maternities hospital. They also struck a public pool that was sheltering women and children. They also admitted to using thermobaric bombs, which are these devastating bombs that basically explode people's lungs, and they're shelling apartment buildings. So I have no idea why anyone right now would be saying that Putin isn't a war criminal. The evidence is so clear.
And Congressman Lieu, going back to an earlier theme that we were discussing, do you even recognize the Republican Party anymore? Like, one of the things we say here at MeidasTouch is, we shouldn't even be calling them conservative because they don't even want to conserve democracy. What happened?
I don't recognize the Republican base. Now, there are, for example, never Trumpers who are Republican. Those folks I recognize. You do see some moderate Republicans. Liz Cheney, for example, is still a Republican.
Yeah.
But I completely understand what you're saying. Same with Adam Kinzinger. Every now and then, Mitt Romney shows streaks of courage. So you do see some Republicans that I can still recognize, but their base, no, I cannot understand where Marjorie Taylor Greene is coming from, for example. It's completely alien to me.
Terrifying. Absolutely. And I'm really curious to pick your brain on this one specifically. What are the issues that you think Americans should be focused on that aren't getting enough attention?
Oh, so again, the major issues are the kitchen table issues, such as jobs and the economy, and also addressing inflation. In terms of what I think we really need to do to not have the world go into major catastrophe would be climate change. We absolutely have to address that issue. And also, our dependence on fossil fuels is what gives countries like Russia their power. If Europe wasn't so dependent on fossil fuels from Russia, Europe would be even more engaged in cracking down on Russia. Now, the European countries have actually done quite a good job right now in what they've done so far, but they'd be even freer to really sanction Russia if they weren't so dependent on fossil fuels coming from Russia.
And then lastly, how do you think the January 6th committee is doing overall? Do you think we're progressing well over there?
I do. I talked to a number of the January 6th committee members. They're doing a fantastic job, and they have gotten just a ton of documents, interviewed hundreds of witnesses. When I was a House impeachment manager, and I always have to clarify it was for the second impeachment trial because the former president was just that bad that he needed two. We knew that January 6th was more than just a one-day thing. There was a lot of buildup to it. You had the president repeatedly talking about the big lie, but you had also different folks who were putting in place essentially the mechanisms to try to overturn the election. We also know that there was a lot of things done after January 6th to, again, try to throw the election into doubt. We could never get all that information, one, because of time. We were considering how much time we had in order to do the trial. So very pleased the January 6th committee is delving into those issues very deeply, and also figuring out exactly what the President of the United States was doing during those critical 3 to 4 hours when he was watching an attack on the Capitol and nothing was coming from the White House and nothing was happening. And my view is that he was actually cheering on the protesters and taking actions to want to make them succeed.
Now, I have a bad habit of saying last question, then actually following up with yet another question. So apologies on this one, but I really need to hear your thoughts here as well, because I'm just so curious. From what you've seen, do you think there's enough evidence for the DOJ or the state attorney generals to criminally indict Trump?
That is a great question. I'm a former prosecutor, so let me sort of give you my view. There are a whole range of things that are very bad things. And the former president did a lot of very bad things. That's different from a very bad thing being illegal. It might be illegal. It might not be illegal. So there's a difference there. And then there's another difference between a very bad thing, which is also legal, and you can prove it in court, right? So there are multiple steps before you would, in fact, indict someone, because not only does it have to be a very bad thing, it has to be a very bad thing that violates the law and that you believe a jury would convict on. I can't tell what all their evidence is. I don't have access to that. The Department of Justice would really be the ones that would. And so I trust them to go through the process to see if they can go from a very bad thing to proving it in court. And we'll see what they do.
Congressman Ted Lieu, Jordy asking the hard-hitting questions today, huh?
I was coming for it today. I was so excited to have Congressman Lieu on the podcast. I really prepared.
Congressman Lieu, we so appreciate you coming on the MeidasTouch podcast and for all your work fighting for democracy.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Great interview with Congressman Ted Lieu. When you have Congressman Ted Lieu, like you have like the foremost expert in Congress on just spitting truth bombs, eh?
Jordy's raising his hand. I think, does that mean you want to speak, Jordy?
Yeah, I'm trying this new thing where if I raise my hand, maybe I could get a word in.
Yeah,
you're pointing at me, talking to me?
Yeah, you. Yeah, what's up?
I told you guys I was going to bring it that interview. I really prepared. I was really excited to interview the congressman.
You really prepared. This is the first time Jordy's prepared for it.
It was the glasses.
How many was it? 3 questions? Was it 4 questions? I don't know.
I lost track.
That's a hat trick. That is a hat trick right there. More news to report. Some brief news on the ongoing courageous efforts by Ukraine and their winning efforts right now to repel the unlawful Russian invasion. Demoralized Russian soldiers now are parking their vehicles and just kind of walking off into the woods, in significant numbers. And this was tweeted by the open source intelligence monitor, OSINT Defender, and the Ukraine Information Army show destroyed equipment they say belongs to the Russian army. We also have this coming from American intelligence that Russia's military has lost over 7,000 soldiers. I mean, just think about that number. And war is horrific. I mean, we know that, but these are.
Well, we'll put it in perspective. That number is greater than the amount of American troops who were killed in over 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. In
a matter of a month,
20 days,
less than a month, 20 days. And, these are young soldiers, a lot of them were completely lied to and who didn't even know why they were there, who lost their lives invading a sovereign nation like Ukraine. And the blood is on Putin's hands. The blood is on Lavrov's hands. Frankly, the blood is on the hands of American propagandists who try to support them. And we should also not just talk about the Russian military. I mean, horrific human rights violations. And Congressman Lieu talked about it in the interview in Mariupol, bombing of locations known to be inhabited by women and children and civilians who are hiding. Mass death being caused by Putin. But we see the bravery of the Ukrainians, repelling, as I mentioned at the outset, the Russian invaders on all fronts, doing a great job. The Russians thought within 3 hours they were going to take Kyiv. 3 hours, Kyiv. In the first 10 to 15 days, the Russian plan was they were going to be controlling the whole government. Mm-hmm. Not even close. And so that's just why, and it's the bravery of the Ukrainians, the spirit, the soldiers, the citizens, everybody there. That's just why I was so amped up and so passionate at the beginning of the show, because we're so blessed to have these platforms.
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, here in the United States, where I could be in my living room and convert it into a studio. Brett could be in the Star Wars, the Death Star, wherever Brett shoots from. Jordy is on Mars. We could all be in our different locations. But in all seriousness, from the comfort of our homes.
Yeah.
And it's very easy. If you want to play to people's fears, to play to people's lowest base denominators, to be unsophisticated, to fight for people who already have power and privilege. That shit's easy. Mm-hmm. And so it's using platforms and building platforms to help the people who are truly the courageous people. That's not us. I mean, I like to think that I work my ass off, but being in this living room, that's nothing compared to what people are out there, community groups go through every day in the United States, fighting for their rights. What Ukrainians are going through right now, not just Ukrainians, what democracy people are fighting for in Myanmar. I've been speaking with some groups who fled Myanmar, where a military dictatorship took over. And these are brave people who are losing their lives every day there. We shouldn't also not focus on areas like that and what's going on in, what's going on in Yemen and the Russians killing Syrians. There are so many courageous people each and every day who risk their lives. And I'm just honored to have a small part of trying to use the platform that we have to fight for them. And Brett, you want to talk a little bit about some domestic news, but before doing that, let me tell you about our partner, Athletic Greens. Everybody knows that I love Athletic Greens. I'm going to have you do something right now, Brett.
All right.
Put the photo of, it was a Jordy who sent me the photo.
Jordy sent it, but I'll put it
Jordy sent me a photo after the last one. Jordy was like, you actually really do lose a lot of weight.
I mentioned on the last show, whenever I open up YouTube, it brings me back to before we had Athletic Greens even as a sponsor, before you even started taking it.
You gotta get that fixed.
One episode
supposed to work like that.
Yeah, YouTube is definitely not supposed to work like that. And it always takes me this one rant that you do. I'm like, whoo, this is a different human being.
Anyway, show the photo. And for people watching, I was overweight and I lost a lot of weight as a result of using Athletic Greens. And not just me, but all the Meidas Mighty. I would say I get dozens of DMs every day when we talk about Athletic Greens. And I've seen hundreds of posts now online of people who have been their life has been changed by Athletic Greens, who have lost weight, who have healthier lives, who are energized because of Athletic Greens. And so before Athletic Greens, I would basically use gummies and pills and all these different things as my vitamin routine. And I thought it was working, but clearly the proof is in those photos. It wasn't working. But then I took Athletic Greens, which has 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source, superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens. They do it for you. They do the hard work for you. So you know what you do, right? I scoop-de-doopity the powder. I loop-de-de-loop-de-de the powder in the cup-de-de-cup-de-de. And in the cup, I shake the cup, I drink it. And it's just super simple. And I have all the vitamins. So far, Athletic Greens has not gotten upset at my scoop-diddy doop-diddy routine because our people love it. But
there's still time.
There's still time.
There's
We
still
could get
time.
an email any moment saying, please have Ben stop saying scoop diddy doop diddy doing the ad read.
But I think they know that I love athletic greens.
It's true.
It's lifestyle friendly. Whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy free, or gluten free, it costs you less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than your cold brew habit. And tons of people take some kind of multivitamin anyway. And it's important to choose the one with high quality ingredients that your body will actually absorb. Right now, please reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition, especially as we're in the flu and cold season. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1 year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/Meidas. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Meidas, and take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Seriously, people. Get Athletic Greens, athleticgreens.com/Meidas. And Jordy looking fit there also in that little get up.
Well, you heard Congressman Ted Lieu, or as you like to call him, Ted or Teddy. He was really
Teddy. Tell me about it, Teddy.
He was really impressed by our gear. Brett, why don't you tell folks about Buck Mason?
Absolutely. I'm wearing my Buck Mason too. I love Buck Mason so much because Buck Mason makes all the essentials. We got Jordy modeling right now for those listening: jeans, shirts, jackets, all my go-tos, and so much more. I love the tailored look and fit of their t-shirts. Even after wearing them and putting them through the wash after wash, they look just as good as when I first wore them. The curved hem tee is fantastic. GQ loves it as much as I do, calling it the best t-shirt in the game. That is actually the one that I am currently wearing right now. See, what I've never told, the secret to the Meidas Mighty, something I never told, is the shirts I wear on nearly every episode of the MeidasTouch podcast, dating back to way before Buck Mason ever was a sponsor, are Buck Mason shirts, often paired with Buck Mason jeans and a Buck Mason jacket, because I've been obsessed with them, because there was a store right by me where I used to live in Los Angeles in Silver Lake that I would visit on a weekly basis. I knew all the employees by name and I loved their stuff so much. Once you try Buck Mason, just like me, it'll become your go-tos. I assure you. Head over to buckmason.com/Meidas. This is like the best deal ever. You get a free t-shirt with your first order.
Wild.
That's buckmason.com/Meidas to get a free t-shirt with your first order. buckmason.com/Meidas. And you don't even have to get it for yourself. You can get it for your family members. They make great gifts. Get Buck Mason. I love my Buck Mason. I cannot say enough things. Please support this brand. They're a great, great, great company.
Love it, Brett. If you read this news about Kyrsten Sinema,
the Axios story.
Yeah. We got to talk about the Axios story on Kyrsten Sinema, and it's in connection with a book, right, Brett, that is coming out soon?
Yeah. So it's like the first book that's coming out about the Biden administration. Like, we all remember all these books that have come out throughout the Trump administration stuff. This is the first book that is coming out detailing some of the things that have happened inside the Biden administration in the first year. A few things came out of the story that Axios reported. And if you had mixed feelings on Kyrsten Sinema, I don't think you will have after this. And if you did not like Kyrsten Sinema before this, this is not going to make you like her anymore, I assure you.
I guess so this is where I kind of get torn, honestly, when we do the Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin coverage, because since it is a 50-50 split right now, the importance of the 50-50 split, with the vice president being the tiebreaker, the amount of positive things we've been able to accomplish, though, with judges and appointing judges on the bench is like one of the most important things. And all of this would have been blocked if we didn't have Sinema and Manchin, unfortunately. I hate to break it to you, but that's just the reality.
And I encourage people to, we hate on Politico a lot for their kind of more gossipy rag part, like the Politico playbook and stuff. But Politico did an excellent article, and it's called Schumer's Senate Shocker, Bills Are Passing, seriously. And it's about the fact that the Democratic Senate has actually passed like more bills than Senates have in recent history, including an anti-lynching bill that passed recently, including all this aid to Ukraine. Schumer is quietly doing the work behind the scenes to pass all these bills, but they're not being publicized good enough. I think, I know people have mixed feelings on Schumer. I think Schumer's biggest weakness is his ability to message. And so we need other people to like message on his behalf. I even see like when he's asked by the media to like comment on stories, he speaks with these like very like flowery phrases and words that like take like 6 sentences to get a point, when you could just say like Republicans are against your healthcare.
He's too smart. I mean, the reality is
he's too
that
smart. Yeah.
He's too smart, and his messaging is probably great and A plus if you were kind of giving like a lecture in like in an advanced philosophy course. But sometimes you just kind of have to break down his accomplishments of all of the jobs that have been created with the legislation that Democrats have passed.
Let me give you an example of a Schumer. This is like a classic Schumer response. I just dug it up. This is Chuck Schumer talking about Ron Johnson and Rick Scott. And he goes, perhaps the senator from Wisconsin should join the senator from Florida in creating a new hurting working families caucus so he can more easily track their truly repressive vision for the American people. Like, I get what he's saying. Like, good, but can't you just say like Republicans are against working families?
If you can't put it on a bumper sticker, you lose half your audience.
Yeah, Republicans want to hurt Americans. Done. It just doesn't need that extra elaboration. But you have to give Schumer credit that he's able to pass these bills. And I know we got here, we took a little detour that we're going to talk about the cinema stuff, and we'll get there in a sec. But you have to acknowledge, and I highly recommend that you read this Politico piece about Schumer's accomplishments, because the Senate is getting stuff done, getting important stuff done.
Yeah, I mean, look, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, though, gigantic, right? The $14 billion for Ukraine, gigantic. The reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, right? Gigantic. The anti-lynching bill, gigantic. And he's hoping, this is what the Politico article says, to get a few more bipartisan wins under his belt, such as expanding semiconductor manufacturing as part of a China competitiveness measure, as well as limiting the cost of insulin to $35. These are important pieces of legislation that that he's passing. On the cinema side, it was funny. I think Biden compared her to like a TikToker. He's like, I just don't understand even like where she's coming from. Like, I'm really lost in what's her point, because this is where I'm confused about her more than Manchin, because she purported to be identifying with ideas that would normally be associated with progressive ideas. But when you read the story about and what's coming out in the book about her, like, she seemed to be very supportive of like Andy Biggs.
Yeah.
Like, she said he's misunderstood. Like, he's one of the most like right-wing radical extremists that there are. She seemed to kind of go down this conspiracy rabbit hole a little bit over the past few years. And you've seen that transformation in a lot of kind of, not a lot, but in some of the friends that I have, maybe she's just kind of gone down that kind of rabbit hole that a lot of people have been sucked down, unfortunately, during that COVID period. I don't know. I'm not trying to make excuses for her, but it's just been one of the most disappointing things, because there really was so much momentum around her and so much promise and what she could deliver. And so, like, when someone who you
and we know people who work their asses off writing postcards, doing phone calls for her to get her elected. So it's so sad and disheartening. Like, what do you say
when
to
someone
those
you
people?
respect and admire kind of lets you down most? It's kind of like that hurts the heart even a little more.
And let me read some of these bits from the book. So the book says that Biden aides complained that Sinema sounded more like a Republican than a Democrat. And at a private fundraiser in DC with a Republican heavy group of lobbyists, this has not been reported before, she portrayed herself as anti-tax and anti-government. She mocked Biden while speaking warmly about House GOP leader Kevin McCarthy, and even defended far-right Representative Andy Biggs, who denied the election results and claimed Antifa had infiltrated the Capitol riot. Sinema said, I love Andy Biggs. I know some people think he's crazy, but that's just because they don't know him. Andy Biggs is like literally one of like the craziest of the crazy Congress people, like one of the biggest insurrectionists in our government. And here she is praising him and mocking Biden. Separately, Sinema told colleagues 5 or 6 other Senate Dem moderates were, quote, hiding behind my skirt, as she pushed back on the left, I guess trying to say that there were other people who maybe supported her in the party that were hiding and taking cover behind her. The book goes on to say, in the spring of 2021, Sinema became the first ever lawmaker to argue with White House aides when they asked her to wear a face mask in the company of the president, repeatedly asking why that was necessary when she had been vaccinated. And Sinema discouraged Biden from coming to Arizona after the president signed the COVID rescue plan in 2021. So that just shows you really from day one, because Biden signed the COVID rescue plan in March, I think. Like it was very early on in his presidency. And so from like day one of the presidency, Sinema was anti-Biden and anti-Democrats and made it her mission to oppose Democrats and support lunatics like Andy Biggs. I mean, my trust issues are acting up right now. My trust issues.
Look, she played us. She played everyone. That's how she got elected. That's my personal opinion on it. Not too long ago, we had a guest on the show. I won't say the guest name, and I asked them because I think they had a close working relationship. Hey, is Kyrsten Sinema a Republican, like a DL Republican? I got laughed at by the brothers, by the guest. I think she's a secret Republican.
Yeah, well, she's certainly acting like it. But like Ben said, like we have to like baby these people a little bit because of this 50-50 Senate, which is so annoying. And like, you know, but it's like, we got to call out bullshit on both sides. I mean, you know, that's why when we called out Marjorie Taylor Greene yesterday, we also called out Joe Manchin for being on his iPad during the Zelenskyy speech. And it's like, oh, well, if, you know, I keep going back to Dale.
It's just infuriating. That's
it's
why.
like if we said like, it's like if we said during the speech, you know, during the speech of Zelenskyy, Joe Manchin was seen, you know, scrolling on his iPad, and he was like, well, from seconds 44 to 87. During that time, he was not scrolling on his iPad. And this, so fact check false, because he was not doing it during the whole speech. He was just doing it in the part that you showed. Fact check false. This is a lie.
Fact check false. It was a Microsoft Surface. It's like, dude,
yeah.
What are you doing, Daniel? What are you doing?
Well, but here's the thing, and this is why, though, to me, it's a learning tool. It's not so much him, but it's a reflection of, I think, broader issues of what's wrong with the media and why we need an unapologetically pro-democracy media, because we don't have two sides here of both Democrats and Republicans loving democracy and fighting for democracy. We have a political party that supports democracy, or people who support democracy, and we have people who are giving aid and comfort to Putin, like Marjorie Taylor Greene is. And we have to call it out, and we have to be nuanced about it. And so one of the things I pride ourselves on in the work we do at MeidasTouch, and I know this is what you like about listening to these podcasts and watching it, is that we spend hours and hours and hours painstakingly researching things, giving nuance, not just kind of, you know, doing a post that's an inflammatory post and that's it. And so when people with major platforms try to pigeonhole you into certain labels and then try to kind of call you out when the efforts, when one, they're wrong, but two, their efforts could be spent and their talents could be spent fact checking, working hard, researching, reporting on issues that truly matter and that truly are life and death. That is ultimately where I net out on all, you know, on all of these issues, which is why we always tell you on this podcast, it's not just informational, it's not just educational, it's also motivational, and we're a team. Like we're a team. We're all in this together. I fight for my team. I fight every day for my team, and we gotta work. This isn't just listen to a podcast and then we go on about our day, right? We listen to this podcast and then we take action. And so we tell each and every one of you to try to do something, even if it's a little something, each and every day to make this country safer, to make this country a pro-democracy country, to elect representatives to Congress, to state legislators, to school boards, to Congress, wherever, that are pro-democracy, and to fight in your own way each and every day. Jordy's pointing to the bumper sticker, vote blue over Q. Jordy just does things and expects me to understand like what his messaging is. But want to thank each and every one of you. This is how you could help MeidasTouch, though, too, in a very, very small way. Subscribe to the MeidasTouch podcast channel. Subscribe to the MeidasTouch YouTube channel. The YouTube channel's just undergone some rapid growth over the past few weeks, and we appreciate everybody who watches these on the YouTube. And do me a favor, leave a 5-star review, please. A 5-star review and write about what you like about these podcasts. That helps with the algorithms. It helps with the rankings. And so all you got to do is wherever you get your podcast, go to the MeidasTouch page. And if it allows you to do a review, write the review, give it a 5-star review. Thank you all from the bottom of my heart for listening, supporting, fighting with us here at MeidasTouch. Brett, any final words before we toss it to Jordy?
Yes, I want to say, just be on the lookout. We got some exciting new MeidasTouch videos on the way. We got some exciting new billboard campaigns on the way. Ooh. And a lot coming down the pipeline. We've been working really, really hard. Midterms are fast approaching, and we are working our asses off, and I'm excited to start sharing some of the new things with you guys. So thank you very much. And Jordy, I'll let you take us away.
Next week is our 2-year anniversary. Shout out to the Midas Mighty.